Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise to offer my bipartisan amendment to H.R. 1638, the Iranian Leadership Asset Transparency Act, and would like to thank my colleague from Texas, Judge Poe, for joining me in this effort. Iran is a bad and dangerous actor in a volatile region of the world, which is why Congress has enacted sanctions in response to Tehran's dangerous ballistic missile program and support for terrorist proxy groups, Hezbollah. We must hold senior Iranian leadership accountable for their destabilizing actions in the region and around the world. The legislation on the floor today is an effort to shine a light and focus our efforts on assets held by top Iranian officials, including the Supreme Leader, members of the Council of Guardians, members of the Expediency Council, and high-ranking military leaders. Specifically, the bill requires the Secretary of the Treasury to report to Congress information on the assets held by senior Iranian leaders. Included in this report are recommendations on how to improve the effectiveness of U.S. sanctions to prevent these assets and funding from being used by Iranian officials to further develop Iran's ballistic missile program. My amendment simply, but importantly, expands this requirement to include Iran's human rights abuses. We should be using every tool in our toolbox to make clear that Iran that its human rights abuses are unacceptable. The human rights situation in Iran is appalling, and abuses permeate many aspects of Iranian society. In Iran, repression and persecution of members of different religious faiths, including Sunni Muslims, Christians, and Baha'is, is pervasive. The State Department's International Religious Freedom Report of 2016 cites at least 103 members of minority religious groups imprisoned for their religious activities. Since 1979, Iran has executed more than 200 Baha'i leaders, and over the past 10 years has conducted more than 850 arbitrary arrests of Baha'i individuals. Sexual orientation and gender identity are not protected categories from discrimination under Iranian law, and same-sex acts are punishable by flogging and possibly even death. Arbitrary and unlawful killings are numerous. The State Department's annual human rights report says the Iranian government announced 114 executions in August of 2016, and that unofficial reports suggest a total of 469 executions by the end of that year. The UN puts this number even higher at 530 executions in 2016. Freedom of speech is limited, media is censored, and publications have been banned and closed by the government. Harassment and detainment of journalists continues, and Iran's citizens are not allowed to criticize the government, supreme leader, or official religion. The electoral system in Iran is neither free nor fair. In 2016, 79% of the candidates running for the Assembly of Experts and 58% running for the Islamic Consultative Assembly were disqualified by the Guardian Council. And we cannot forget about the Americans and other foreigners that Iran has unjustly detained and continues to hold on fabricated charges, including the following individuals whose family members testified before the House Foreign Affairs Committee earlier this year: Bakr and Siamak Namazi, Nizar Zaka, and of course Robert Levinson, who has been held for more than 10 years. These are just a handful of examples of egregious human rights abuses by the Iranian government. This amendment helps ensure the funds held by senior Iranian leaders do not contribute to these human rights abuses, and that U.S. sanctions are best positioned to improve Iran's human rights situation. I hope that my colleagues will join me in supporting this important amendment, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I claim time in opposition to the amendment, although I'm not opposed.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
I thank the chairman.